I want to bring on our next guest to continue talking about Trump's legal battles and the cost that's going to be associated with that. So we're joined now by Sheila Krumholz. She's the Center for Responsive Politics Executive Director. Sheila, I've been getting a lot of texts from the Trump campaign asking for money as a part of their defense fund. I know that we have some of those texts. If we can show everyone at home what they look like. I'm wondering, this campaigning for a legal battle, essentially, is this something new, or is it uncommon for campaigns to have these legal accounts or to finance, really, as a part of their campaign, recounts or contesting election results?
Very common, or rather not very common, but historically there have been many legal recounts. And from our perspective, what's most important is that we have access to the information about who's funding these recounts and runoffs in this case. And we're expecting, given the intensity of the fight for the Senate, that this will be a blowout. There will be for runoffs record amounts raised.
Now, I know that the Center for Responsive Politics, you guys have a website called Open Secrets. Open Secrets has been looking into this. And of course, we just heard from Jess Smith that Biden's camp is also going to be, wading into a legal battle. Is one side better funded than the other when it comes to these legal accounts or these legal issues? Is it Democrats or is it Republicans?
I'm not sure historically which side kind of tips the scales. I would say in this election cycle, of course, we saw the Biden camp better funded, and specifically Act Blue performing much better than Win Red in terms of raising massive numbers of small donations. Act Blue had a longer track record. They had been at it a while longer. So I would expect that we would see massive sums raised by donors, both large and small, and perhaps continued greater success for the Democrats through Act Blue.
And to that point, both campaigns are also able to tap into funds and money from the national committees, correct? So it's not just their own campaigns' coffers that they're going to have to rely on for all of these lawsuits. For example, Donald Trump's campaign will also be able to turn to the Republican National Committee, which of course has hundreds of millions of dollars to also help in these battles.
Correct. So the RNC is trying to raise at least 60 billion, maybe more like 100 million, can raise jointly with Trump through his joint fundraising committees. And his campaign has announced, or rather advertised in the fine print, that part of that money will go to pay down debts for the campaign, which is not great transparency to have that in the fine print. But regardless, they will be coordinating on that fundraising.
So to that point, that $60 million that was reported originally by Reuters that the Trump campaign is going to try to raise for those legal expenses. I saw that Open Secrets had done a nice breakdown that the Trump campaign had spent over $20 million on legal expenses. And that's compared to President-elect Biden, who only spent roughly $2 million as you guys were finding it. I'm wondering then, how stunning is it to hear that the Trump campaign trying to raise an additional 60, you mentioned a number as high as $100 million to challenge these election results. It seems like a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, but Trump has a massive email and text list and a fervent, passionate base to tap. And they've been bombarding their list with messages for funding for the legal defense. So he will rely heavily on this list, undoubtedly. I should add, he's also launching a leadership PAC called Save America. That is yet another way to raise money. So for donors who've maxed out to the campaign, maxed out to the RNC, here is yet another pocket of his coat that they can fill.
Is that at all? I mean, that almost seems a little bit unethical. Is that unusual for campaigns to kind of come up with almost create extra revenue streams to tap different donors so that they can add more money to their campaigns once they've run out of all the legal options that they can fundraise in?
Well, it's perfectly legal, of course, for him to create a leadership PAC. It's unusual to do it at this stage of a campaign, and clearly it's because they're trying to go back to a base that has already, many of whom have already maxed out to the campaign and the RNC. So they want to, again, have another fund through which they can raise money. He can then use that money. He cannot transfer it all to his campaign, but he can use the money for travel. He has a lot of flexibility in how he can use it. He can use it to stay at his own resorts, et cetera. There are fewer restrictions on PACs because they're supposed to be independent of the campaign, but here it is really an extension of the campaign.
Now, I know that the Center for Responsive Politics found that this 60 million, of course, would be much, much more than the last previous record of money spent on legal services, which was $8 million back in 2004 with George Bush. And of course, we all remember George Bush having to fight his own election contested lawsuit back in 2000 with Al Gore versus George Bush. So it seems that the 60 million, much, much more than some of those legal battles that we saw 20 years ago over that presidential election. Does that at all indicate in your mind just how long or how protracted this battle might be if this money is so much greater than the money we've seen raised in previous years to essentially contest elections or ask for recounts?
Well, the challenges to ostensible illegalities had been projected for some time. So I think there has been planning that has gone into this. It may well be protracted. I think what occurred in 2000 caught everyone flat-footed, and so there was this rush to gather funds for the recount effort. So here, I think we're already seeing numerous legal challenges being made, and so yes, they're probably anticipating that this will be a much larger, broader fight. Again, I should reference that some of this money is being raised to pay down the debt. That isn't being advertised quite as loudly, but it is kind of that twofold purpose. So it is different in that sense.
Have about a minute left with you here, Sheila, and I want to ask you now about the Georgia Senate races. Of course, incredibly important to both Democrats and Republicans, especially Democrats can grab those two seats. They're going to be able to grab power of the Senate. That is, of course, if Vice President-elect Kamala Harris remains the Vice President-elect after all of these lawsuits. Are you, as you're looking at this, could this become the most expensive Senate race in history, given how important they are to both parties and how much money everyone is seeing at home has already been raised for those races?
We are anticipating that this will be just an enormous money bomb for both races. It's hard to say whether this will break the record, but it's different too because, again, the balance of the Senate hangs in the balance, and also that these two runoff races are being held at once, and they're coordinating. Loeffler and Perdue have created a joint fundraising committee called Senate Georgia Battleground. Outside groups will be coordinating, mentioning both candidates, perhaps, and there is undoubtedly going to be some exhaustion on the part of donors, but also kind of continuing the fight for to see the results out for the 2020 election. So I expect that the money will be huge. It'll be drawing in all kinds of players, maybe Hollywood, certainly get out the vote efforts and registration for young voters who hadn't turned 18 by the general, but will be able to vote by the time of this runoff.